Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Little Africa News is on the Spot, our weekly political show, providing you with the latest news, analysis of what's going on in New York City local politics, state politics, national, as well as global. We have a lot to cover today. There's a lot going on in New York City as well as nationally that we'll be covering. But first, we're going to start with the introduction of our guests for today's show. And first of all, our first guest is Mr. Gregory Floyd, the president of Teamsters Local 237. Mr. Floyd, thank you so very much for joining us this evening at On the Spot here at Little Africa News.
Thank you for inviting me. Pleasure to be here.
Thank you. Thank you. Our next guest is Ms. Damaris Moné, a political advisor. Damaris, thank you so very much for joining us.
Thank you very much for inviting me, Mona. I appreciate it.
Thank you. And last but not least is Mr. Leonardo Coello with Victory Election Systems.
Hello, Mona. Hello, everyone.
Thank you. Hello. So we're going to get started because this week the biggest news for us New Yorkers, for us New York City residents, is schools opening for the new year. So I'm a New York City public school parent. Leonardo, you as well, and unfortunately, I have to say personally, I'm not surprised, and that's why we have Mr. Floyd here with us, because schools reopened on Monday. Today is Thursday, and I've lost count of the number of incidents that have happened in our schools, starting with Monday's incident of a beatdown at a public high school, ending with yesterday's incident of a slashing of a student at DeWitt Clinton High School. So, Mr. Floyd, you warned us, you told us. I know as a parent, I've been very vocal about it. What happened at DeWitt Clinton High School yesterday is so unfortunate. I wouldn't want to get that call. And we have Leonardo here, who happens to be a parent of a senior at DeWitt Clinton High School. So, Mr. Floyd, why isn't the city listening to us when we say we have a problem when it comes to school safety and the shortage of school safety agents?
Well, one, I'd like to say my heart goes out to every parent who has a child in the New York City public school system. I've been trying to sound the alarm for the parents because the politicians have their own agenda, and they like sound bites, and they say what they think sounds good to them, but they don't have children in the New York City public school system. So one of the reasons why this is happening is because politicians are not affected because their children either go to private school or they don't have children in the New York City school system. So when you don't have a personal connection to what you're talking about and what you're in charge of, I would say, developing policy, you tend to experiment with other people's children. That's what I'm going to say. So that is one of the main reasons why they haven't listened, and that's one of the main reasons why we find ourselves in a crisis with 1,000 less school safety agents. And this started last March at a city council hearing, and it's continued. And this fight really started with the New York Civil Liberties Council, with that organization. They don't have children in the New York City school system. So once again, I'm urging every parent to speak out and be heard, because this affects your children. And unfortunately, Darius, it's reported home to you because it happened at your son's school. this time. That happened on Wednesday, which was yesterday. Tuesday, there was a pellet gun found around Grover Cleveland High School, stashed outside. And Monday was the beatdown that you spoke about. So this is the first 3 days of school, and we've seen these incidents, and that's the incidents that have been reported. The Department of Education is notorious for not telling us everything that's going on. I'm sure there were more incidents that happened in the schools that was not reported.
So, Leonardo, not only are you the parents of a senior at DeWitt Clinton High School, but your professional background includes being an administrator, a school administrator. So first of all, as a parent, when you heard about this, and there's an article in today's New York Post that speaks about the slashing yesterday, what are your thoughts?
I mean, your mind runs, the gamut of emotions, right? You're scared, you're upset, everything that comes to mind when you hear what happens. You're frustrated. I mean, the school has metal detectors, for God's sake, and yet a student is able to sneak in with a weapon like that. I mean, it really was very impactful to me in several different ways, Mona. Like you said, personally, the aspect of having a child in that particular school, like many other school campuses, large school campuses, those campuses are broken up with different schools and different administrations and things like that, but it's still all in the same building. It was tough to hear. It was traumatic, and those things, they impact your child. When your child is involved and it's around, any type of violence, it does have an impact some way, somehow on them. Professionally, like you said, I try to give people a true understanding of what the trickle-down effect is when the school safety staff is not supported. As an administrator, when school safety is not supported, not present, not able to do the jobs that they do so well, it puts a lot of pressure on the administrators of the school, because they tend now to have to do certain jobs that they're not equipped for, that they're not able to do and stuff, right? As an administrator, a lot of times on many of the schools that I went to, I would incorporate, systems of, restorative justice within the schools. And the school safety agent was pivotal to me in those systems and stuff, because when I got into those schools and I met with those school safety persons, they were able to give me the rundown on every single student, their family members, what's happening with them. They told me, Mr. Leo, this is this person, talk to this person about this. He's interested in this parent, reach out to this parent. I'll give you the number to that parent. They were so vital in the building of the culture in the schools, that I just don't understand why they're not getting the support that they need. I think if they're not in the building and if you don't have a relationship with them, I guess you just see them as people with uniforms inside of a school. But they really truly are the heroes of our public schools, because their presence, the relationship. Mind you, these people are not in there, they're not, they're not in there with guns or anything like that. So, the way that they maintain order, or they support, is really building relationships with children and building relationship with parents. And that's the true way to have an impact on the youth. And so many of them are doing it. And when you see this, it is really truly just a trickle down effect at the end of the day.
Yeah, no, it's very it's very concerning to me. Damaris, what are your thoughts on this matter, seeing this explosion, this actual expected explosion of violent incidents in the schools here in New York City schools during week one?
It's definitely hard to say, because I am going to say and continue saying to people, I am grateful that my children are grown. I've been a mother for 32 years, and watching everything that parents have gone through with COVID and online learning. And while I have a child who's in college and it was difficult for her during the online learning, now when you come into the nitty gritty of coming back to school, the issue that we're going to find is how many, I mean, there's frustration from them being locked up and not seeing people, the frustration about the systems, you know, that's weighing on them, on top of having to deal with, let's say, any beef that was going on online, right? And so it may have been instigated online, continued online, kids were bullying each other, you know, potentially online, whatever was happening. And then when you finally have them now face to face, all that frustration that was coming along with any anger that may have, you know, been instigated, we're now going to have to start dealing with that. We've got the emotions, we've got that energy, we've got the anger, resentment, bitterness, you know what I mean? And so, and then if there's any rivalries of any, you know, so the teachers may not have been aware of what was happening online, right? Or within their own blocks and their own communities, right? Of really knowing what type of beef was started, you know, amongst other students and what had happened. And so now we're going to witness, it's almost like a boiling pot situation where they didn't have opportunity to release that steam before. And now we're all putting all these kids that have been in this boiler situation, and they're now together, and they're now going to either find, you know, reprieve, where there's those students who couldn't wait to get away from home because they had challenging and abusive and difficult home styles. But then you have those children who didn't have that situation, but they were lonely, they were frustrated because, you know, they didn't get to see their friends, they were social, they were, you know, extroverts, right? They needed to have that social interaction. And so I think we're going to witness and see this, what an experiment this past year has been in psychology and mental health and camaraderie, right? Because, you know, they were there with each other in the beginning when this happening, but frustrations develop and, you know, issues develop. And so now they're amongst their peers where they're going to feel free to release, you know, whatever they're feeling and experiencing. And I think what we're going to experience is we're going to see that. I mean, I'm a product of the 80s where I went to school, so I saw violence. I know exactly what, you know, what went down back in the 80s. And so, and like I said, you know, my children went through, you know, the system, you know, pre 9/11 and post 9/11, and seeing all the violence that was going on there. It's an unfortunate situation that as human beings, we keep finding ourselves, you know, hurting other human beings for reasons that, you know, we do kind of know more or less, that we understand psychologically now, but it still doesn't change the fact that we as human beings, some of us just have not been taught how to release their frustrations without utilizing violence, right? And so I think right now what we're going to experience is this boiling pot situation with the schools that are gonna come to fruition. And I live, you know, our local high school is dealing with the same, you know, scenario, and it's just an unfortunate situation that we hope that there's going to be more counseling for the kids, because those that lost parents, those that lost friends, those that lost, you know, that lost everything. I mean, they may have, you know, potentially dealing with homeless issues. They haven't been evicted yet, but they realize that they may be evicted, right? So there's all of these emotions and situations that are going on that are beyond anything that we've had to deal with in a society in such a large sum situation. And so it's an unfortunate situation, but it's not really shocking. And and I feel really bad for school administrators and parents, and having to deal with other people's frustrated children who did not learn how to release that energy in a more positive manner.
So I would say, we have two videos of incidents that happened this week in our schools. Let's start with either video. The video is not playing clearly. I want to try the other video to see if that one is a bit clearer. Okay, we're having a difficulty playing these videos, but we'll come back to these videos. But these beatdowns that one happened in a cafeteria, the other happened in a staircase. These beatdowns, I'm seeing young, young men stomping each other. One is on the ground and there's a whole bunch of them and they're busy stomping that student on the floor. They're busy fighting in staircases. And, this, again, I agree. A lot of this, of course, is, dealing with the aftermath of COVID. But these incidents aren't exactly new. They were happening even pre-COVID. And right now, when we look at what's going on, when we look at someone's child's face being slashed yesterday, when we look at a student also, I think it was yesterday or the day before, who was attacked and who responded to the attack by using pepper spray and spraying their attacker, and then also spraying the school safety agent that was there trying to break up the fight. And that's another thing that I also do want to talk about, because I know of at least 3 school safety agents, who've been hospitalized, who've had to go to the emergency room just this week from breaking up fights at schools. And nobody is talking about that. And we need to talk about that, because what people need to realize also is that a large amount of our school safety agents are women. They're majority Black and Hispanic women, and they're there, and they're the ones that are breaking up these fights, and they're the ones who are being hospitalized. So we have schools open now. We have almost 1 million students back at school, and we have a shortage of, I think, almost 1,000 school safety agents. And if I'm not mistaken, and Greg, you can probably answer this, but we were supposed to have a new class, an incoming cohort of school safety agents. And Jumaane Williams, who believes in healing-centered approach, I don't know if he went to go visit the mother and the father of the DeWitt Clinton students whose face got slashed, or went to go and visit the school safety agents that were hospitalized this week with injuries. But our so-called public advocate and the city council, they pushed to delay the start of the class. So not only have we lost, of course, school safety agents due to attrition, but we should have had more school safety agents in our schools starting this September. And it's just week 1. And what scares me is what's going to happen tomorrow and what's going to happen next week. So my question for you, Greg, is where are we now? Because clearly, sitting in a circle and talking about our feelings, or these students talking about their feelings, it's not going to change anything. I'm waiting to hear about students bringing firearms into schools. I'm waiting to hear about those same students who over the summer have been shooting each other, the same teenagers, bringing those guns and bringing the beef and the gang rivalries into the schools. We see it already started on the first day of school. So where are we now? Like, what needs to happen? Because I'm a mother of a 13-year-old young Black man that attends school in the Bronx. Leonardo is the father of 2 young men who attend school. We don't want our children to be victims. I don't want to get the call. I know Leonardo doesn't want to get the call. You on mute, Greg.
We are in trouble because we can't hire school safety agents today that will be available to work. It's an 11-week course. That's a training course, but they have to pass background investigations, psychologicals, just to be hired. They have a class of 250, and my information is when that class goes into the academy, that class won't be available until maybe April, and that's the end of the school year. So the city council, Jamani Williams, Brad Lander, Corey Johnson, when they got involved in this whole process, they put this program behind at least 2 years. They were supposed to hire 500 school safety agents back in July of 2020. Through attrition, people retiring, we are about 1,000 school safety agents less than what they should have. And no one has made that public. 250 that they're touting, they say, yeah, we're going to hire 250. The 250 won't be available to probably April, and that's only 25% of what's needed. By the time April rolls around, you will have more people retiring, more attrition. You also have the vaccination policy that's going to be in effect, that people may have to leave because they don't want to get vaccinated. All this is going to come into play. So where are we? We're in trouble. To answer the question that you mentioned, where's Jamani Williams? Jamani Williams is now going to put his hands into his next project, Rikers Island. And this, if schools aren't bad, Rikers Island and our streets. So that's a three-legged stool. So where are we? We are in trouble. We need leadership, and we need leadership right now. And the incoming mayor is going to have his hands full with just solving the public crisis that we are facing on those three levels.
Hey, Mona, if I could add too, you know, I know the video wasn't able to play, but I'm sure everybody has kind of seen it. And for those of you that haven't, you can kind of go on social media and catch it. But I just want to give you guys an insight from an administrator's position of like what's making me so nervous and giving me so much anxiety when I'm watching this video. So, you know, as a person that was an administrator in a building that was cohabitating with other high schools, you know, there's a lot of pressure that comes into assuring that these students in the different schools are not kind of really running into each other and having these issues, because a lot of times these issues actually are happening between students that are at one school and then in another school and stuff. So you have to now, like you see in a staircase there, right? Some of the planning that goes into it. So you have to plan around what dismissals are, what staircase this school is going to go down, what staircase this school is going to go up with, what staircase this school is going to come in, where they're going to exit out. You know, when you're doing, you know, transitions and stuff like that, you know, we got to pull away staff like that are like teachers and stuff, because we have to assign them to a stairway, you know, to watch it as the kids are transitioning and stuff. And the fact that a video like that, the fighting is going on so long and you don't hear a voice of an adult or anybody, just screams to me that there's a shortage of staff, there's a shortage of people that are even available to you know, to intervene in these things and stuff. So there's just so much that I'm seeing in that video as a former administrator that it's really going to be a bad situation.
Yes, no, I agree with you. I just want to try and see if we can play the video, those two videos again, see if it's going to play properly now. And then we have the other video that happened in the staircase as well that I also want to show. And this is just week one. Let me see if we can also show that second video. So, week one, welcome to New York City Public Schools, week one of the brand new 2021-2022 school year. And with all of this violence happening, here we have a shortage. We have a child already slashed. We have children being jumped, children getting beat downs. We have children bringing weapons, students bringing weapons. And I've always said what's happening in the streets, or what's been happening in the streets, is going to spill over into the schools. And it spilled over into the schools on the first day of school. So, I want to thank Greg Floyd for taking the time out and joining us here this evening, because as parents, we are concerned. It is scary for us. We don't want to get that phone call. And as a mother, as a Black woman, I'm also worried about our school safety agents, who are majority women, who are majority Black and Hispanic women, who are mothers, who are grandmothers, and who are doing their best to keep all of our children safe in the schools. And it's very alarming for me to hear that they too are being harmed. They are getting hurt. They're ending up in the emergency room because they're trying to do their best to keep our kids safe. So, Mr. Floyd, thank you so very much for joining us. And as a parent, and I'm sure probably Leonardo as well, we're going to do our best to continue to advocate and ensure that all children are protected in schools. And number one, it starts first with, we need to hire more school safety agents. We need to also provide services for these students. But one thing is clear, and that is that no child can learn in an unsafe environment. And protecting our children when they're in school is the number one priority. So thank you to you. Thank you to all our school safety agents who protect our children every day unarmed. And, I just pray that we're not going to get more serious incidents in the near future.
Thank you.
Thank you. So we're going to continue, and I see our third panelist is on, Michael Oliva from Sykes Global Communications. We're going to just briefly continue on with this safety issue. And what I want to talk about is clearly, what's going on at Rikers. We've heard, we've read the stories, the news articles. We've seen the press conferences that our elected officials are having. We see now that there is a push to release inmates from Rikers. But, we're also dealing with a public safety crisis. So, I'm really curious, and we'll start off with you, Mike. What are your thoughts on Rikers Island and the inmates on Rikers Island? Do you, listening to the press conferences, to all this virtue signaling, do you think that our elected officials, our city council members, our public advocate, our governor, previous governor and current governor, do you think that there's anything that they can do to really remedy the situation? And then also, I just want to add, I was told by some very reliable sources that at Rikers, there is indeed a shortage of correction officers. So they don't have enough correction officers. And the last new correction officers were hired in 2019. So, Mike, what are your thoughts on this? What can be done? What should be done?
Well, first, I apologize for being late. I kept, I'm always on time. I kept trying to get on, and StreamYard would bring me to the brink, and I couldn't get on, so I apologize for that. But, I feel like, there are several issues happening here. One is you have, people on one side of the debate who sort of like, want to decriminalize crime. And then people on the other side of the debate who don't want to, be aware of the reality that, every crime is not the same, and people are disproportionately affected by, prosecution, sentencing, and issues like that. So, and nobody wants to differentiate between the fact that we really need to have less people in jail in general. Number one is the number one determinant of whether or not you're arrested disproportionately is if you're a Black or Latino person. Once arrested, the number one determinant on whether or not you're sentenced to a long sentence or even a sentence at all, or adjourned, and is economics. Robert Kennedy said it in the 60s. It's the number one determinant of whether or not you have a fair hearing in a trial. So these places tend to get overloaded. Now, if you're somebody who commits a violent crime, a rape, a murder, I think you need to be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. Of course, it's a fair trial, but you need to be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law. And one side has to understand that these things aren't all the same, and the other side has to understand that these things are, some people, should not be in prison. The other issue is, it's very easy to say, let's sort of spread people out into different neighborhoods throughout the city. But we saw what happened with the homeless problem. People were not happy. They, just did not want the people in their neighborhoods. Everybody's very progressive until it's in their backyard, right? So the issue, it all comes down to crowding. It all comes down to how many people are in these prisons, why are they in there, and are we putting the serious crimes in prison, or are we finding rehabilitative ways to deal with the other ones? And that's a crucial issue. And my wife's father was a corrections officer. They're good jobs. They have to deal with a lot. It's a tough thing to do, but people need work right now. I'm a little bit surprised that the city hasn't taken it upon itself to make sure that these positions are filled, because I'm sure there's a lot of people out there who would like a job like that and to have the steady income, especially in the times we're in right now.
Leonardo, what are your thoughts on this, especially releasing the inmates, and what actions that elected officials could have taken to prevent this crisis?
Yeah, I think the ball was dropped 50 yards back a while back. I think, when the narrative began about closing Rikers, there was some, legitimacy, there was some truth behind it. And, there were some valid points as to why it should happen. Now, the execution of it, I think it was horrible. I think it was something that was done to gain headlines, to get a certain block of voters in a certain direction. But then when it came time to the true roll up your sleeve and get to work and get this done the right way, a lot of folks look the other way and stuff. And so of course now we are at the situation where this is where we're at now. The jail is completely, in chaos. The correctional officers are being asked to just do too much. I've heard the horror stories of some of them doing, ridiculous amount of hours, overtime. There's some of them, calling out sick, not coming in, because it's just been a toll on them. And then we've seen all the videos of all the violence that's happening in there as well too. So the ball was dropped a long time ago, Mona, and I think nobody really took the initiative to really roll up the sleeves and get the true hard work done. The decision was made to close it in the right way. as far as, inmates being let out, we all know, like, the horror story of Khalid Brower, when, unfortunately he was in there for such, the amount of time that he was in there for no, basically for no reason. And so, that kind of continues to happen today and stuff. All right. And so there's a lot of folks that probably could get let out right now, and maybe, let a bit of the pressure out there for the correction officers. But again, it has to be done the right way. It has to be done the smart way. And I don't know who's going to pick up the baton and do it the right way and how it needs to be done.
Let me just add, Rikers it's a pretty big island. It has facilities that are not in use right now. And during COVID, they could have sort of like looked at, like, why people were there. If you hadn't committed a serious crime, let certain people out. But they had the space to put people and treat them. It wasn't like I think Leonardo makes a good point. Like, the management aspect of all this wasn't there. And as we know, when you think about someone like Bill de Blasio, what's the criticism of, progressive executives? It's great concepts, but when it comes to actually following through and carrying out the ideas they come up with, that management part doesn't happen. And I think we saw that happen in this instance.
Right. And I'd also like to add to that, part of the problem, when we get back and, mentioning Khalid Broward, he wasn't given his due process. He was waiting in prison. He had never been found guilty, right? They were still waiting to see a judge. And that's the problem. It's the backlog of what's going on in criminal cases. Clearly, our correction system needs, our judicial system needs more assistance, more lawyers, more public advocates and public defenders, as well as, ADAs and assistants and researchers, to go in to be able to do the whole due process, so that somebody's not sitting in prison waiting for 2 years, 3 years, because he's being accused of stealing a backpack, right? And so the reality is that was someone's child whose family couldn't come up with the bail money in order to get him out, of prison. And so this poor child sat there and dealt with mental abuse and physical abuse for 3 years, 2-3 years. In his mind, he was innocent. And why was he being tortured? You know what I mean? And so clearly we have to, it's not just what's happening at Rikers, it's the entire judicial system. It's how cases are being, read. It's the backlog of system. It's, prosecutors not necessarily reading through the whole thing. It's just, it's a conveyor belt. It's like next person, and everybody just has a number. They're not a human. We seem to forget the nuances of everybody's case is different. You know what I mean? And so now, that is where definitely our criminal system definitely needs to be revamped and revisited as to how we're going to, we have to have some type of true reformative measures that are being employed, and not just punitive measures, right? And so whether it's a matter of teaching people anger management, learning how to meditate, doing yoga, whatever it is that may need for that individual, right, to deal with, their own mental health issues, right, that may have gotten them locked up in prison and then dealt with more prison issues. And so if you're, I've had to visit people that were in, we don't call them insane asylums any longer. I'm sorry, it was back in the 80s. But I remember just being a visitor, I was going to go crazy, because just seeing the chaos of everything that was there was mind blowing. And I kept thinking, like, even if somebody was just borderline, being in that system had to have broken the straw on, it had to have done some damage. And so I think it's not a matter of building new prisons, and it's not just, closing Rikers. It's really addressing why is somebody in jail for as long as they are without actually seeing the judge, without going through the due process. And then when they do go through the due process, where's the equity in when they're being penalized, right? You have recently it was brought up that the Love and Hip Hop star, he got busted for stealing PPP money, and they've now prosecuted him. He's going to do something like 15 years in prison, but they've kind of ignored everybody else who robbed PPP, and they're not going to do that same amount of time in prison, right? So there is an equity issue that we do need to discuss. There is reformative practices that we actually need to consider. And it's not just closing down the prisons, defunding police, decriminalizing criminals, as you mentioned, because these days it's kind of beginning to feel like they have more rights and they're going to get more restorative, they're going to get more services than law-abiding citizens. And, that's now where the issue happens to take place, where now we have an issue with politicians that are just talking sound bites because they think that sounds great, and they, those that don't know better or don't really understand the broad issues, they're going to vote for that person because they said something great and, oh yeah, it sounds great, defund the police. But when your mother or father are getting beat up or raped or they were shot, who are you seriously going to call? And so we have to have these more robust conversations about what it means to decriminalize crime and what it means to be reformative policies in prison while you're being incarcerated, paying your penance,
Let me just add something which I think is extremely important. The current DA in the Bronx, Darcel Clark, the case of Khalif Browder came before her as a judge several times. He was sent back to Rikers Island. And, a lot of the politicians, in New York City run as quote unquote progressives. They become a judge and then they just do the usual, which is like they put these people back in prison. On the other hand, they wanted to fund the police. So why am I saying all this? Well, first of all, you need the police who are far from perfect, don't get me wrong, but you need the police to actually arrest people who are committing crimes. That's why when you think about voting for judge, pay attention to it. The judiciary is important because when the police make a mistake, the judge is there to determine that mistake. They have to look at these cases very closely. If they don't make a mistake, the judge also has to say this person committed a crime. They need to spend some time in jail. And, there's a lot of contradictions. They say to fund the police because they think it sounds good to the people who fund their campaigns, but they get in office. You look at DA to DA, Cy Vance, anyone else, they don't really reform the office. They sort of, they throw people in the basement. They have no rights, and they go to Rikers Island. And so I just want to say, when you vote for judge, remember, that's the line. That's the person who's going to look at each case and say, this is garbage, or, this person needs to really be tried. And unfortunately, she didn't pay enough attention to that case. She sent him back so many times, and it had a devastating effect.
Mm-hmm. No, I'm so happy that you brought that up, Mike, because people are forgetting about the judges. We really have to pay attention to who we vote for when it comes to judges. And with the situation that happened with this young man, Khalif, like you said, he was sent back. He was sent back to Rikers by our current Bronx DA. So, this is a real problem. But and I know this is probably going to be a very unpopular opinion, but when we also talking about releasing inmates from Rikers, there are some inmates in Rikers that should not be released. We already have enough violence, gun violence, assaults, Asian hate crimes. Our streets, the lawlessness, it's out of control. And if we're going to be releasing inmates from Rikers, where are they going to come? All of these politicians that are talking about release the inmates, where are they going to come? They're going to come back into our communities. And then what's going to happen? All of this, we knew the writing, we saw the writing on the wall. A lot of this could have been avoided. But we are here now, and I'm still not hearing real solutions from our elected officials. All I'm hearing is release them. Well, you're going to release them. They're going to come into our communities. And guess what? Stuff is going to happen. You know, you're going to release them in what? What's going to be the follow-up to the release? So, you know, these are serious concerns. The mayor dropped the ball on this. The city council dropped the ball on this. And this is where we are today. And I think that the number one priority should be is hiring more correction officers, because having the shortage at Rikers is costing people's lives and people's safety. Not just the inmates, but also the correction officers.
Yeah, look, one more thing, and I'm sorry to take up all the time, but this is very important. You know, I've done a lot of judicial races, and basically civil court judges are elected and surrogates are elected. The surrogate is a probate judge. They deal with everybody's trust in the states and things that happen after people die. But what tends to happen is, you know, you win a civil court seat and then you go to Supreme based on a Democratic Party convention. So judicial delegates who are elected in primaries vote for you for Supreme Court. But the civil court thing is interesting because once you win, you can either be put into criminal court, you can be put into civil court, which is cases between like $5,000 and $25,000. It may be more money now, or you can be put into family court, and there are other courts you can possibly put into. And what typically happens is many people are court attorneys, meaning they clerk for a judge for 10 years after becoming an attorney. The party supports them, and they become a judge. And they don't have the breadth of experience necessary to deal with these cases. So when you look at a judge, even though they're not allowed to take positions like I'm pro-choice and I'm against crime and stuff like that, pay attention to their resume. Don't just vote for a judge because the politicians are supporting that judge. Make sure they have, you know, litigation experience. They've been in criminal court. They've been in family court. They've been in you know, small claims court and Supreme Court or the appellate division and stuff like that, that they practice before those courts, because this person can suddenly be doing arraignments. Your child goes to that arraignment and, you know, this person doesn't really know what they're doing and they don't understand the law. This stuff is extremely important because, like you said, someone has to be there to say this person really needs a second chance and this person's a criminal and they need to pay the consequences. And so, again, electing judges is very important.
I'd like to add to that, to what Michael was saying, because one of my clients this year happened to have been a judicial candidate, and Mike is correct. But the whole system, how we elect judges, is actually problematic, because judges are not allowed, judicial candidates are not allowed to ask for fundraising monies from somebody, right? But they need money in order to run for office because it's not cheap, right? And so, which is why the party ends up choosing their judicial candidates, because it's going to be the local party who's going to be able to afford the flyers, the mailers, you know, and paying for the petitions, helping to get the ground troops and such. And so, which is why it's very hard, because a judicial candidate, it may have to come up and be willing to either put in their own monies, right? Spend their own monies, or try to figure out how to develop or build a team to be able to do the ask of the monies and to volunteer for them. Because, and then as it is, you know, a donor could only donate X amount of money before that person, that candidate, if they do become a judge, has to recuse themselves from a case, which makes absolute sense. But it's very difficult for candidates to be run for judicial offices because of the fact that they either have to have, you know, $100,000 of their own money, or have had to have already had a very vast network, but they always have to seem to be impartial. So it's kind of hard. You have to watch what groups you belong to and all of this, right? And so it makes it very difficult, which is why judicial candidates tend to be tapped in by the party machine.
Right, and all these rules, by the way, were made in the 1800s. Like, the districts don't change; they're not subject to the Voting Rights Act. And you need 1,500 signatures, which is more than Senate, Assembly, and City Council for a similar sized district to a City Council district. And as Damaris knows, it's like, you can't ask for money, but you see the people at your fundraiser. So it's sort of silly because you know who's giving you money, yet they don't allow you to actually ask for it as if that's some sort of campaign finance or the conception of it long ago. So she's right. I mean, it's very hard for an outsider candidate to win. And it's designed that way because these rules were made, in the Tammany Hall days when they didn't want any competition, and they still stand today, and it needs reform.
No, I mean, we have, I know next year, definitely in the Bronx, we have some races for judge, and I hope that Bronxites pay attention to next year's judicial races, because again, these are the people that are going to be deciding what happens when and if we go to court. So I want to switch gears, and I want to talk about the other hot topic in New York right now, and that is redistricting. So the Redistricting Commission came out with their proposed lines, and I have to say it's pretty interesting. So I want to touch on their congressional lines that they're proposing. And this redistricting process, it's a little bit complicated. It's a bit of a back and forth. But this first proposal is very interesting. So let's pull up the large. This is the larger version. And as you see it, you can see some of the boroughs, and I just want to zoom in so that we can really look at the Bronx, because it seems like there may be some gerrymandering going on, which of course is expected. But let's see here. So when you look at this map, right? Q, I, and R is the Bronx. And when you look at R, when you look at the bottom of R going to D, that's where you cross into Queens. And that happens to be the proposed lines for Alexandria Ocasio.
Well, wait, Mona. Actually, technically, these are just proposed lines, right?
Yeah, that's what I said. Mm-hmm.
And also, the committee doesn't really say whose district that might be. So you don't really know. And the one more other thing I want to add on, Mona, before you go on, was that we are looking at the Democratic version of the congressional redistricting. There is actually a Republican version as well too. So this current one that we're looking at is actually the Democratic one. Okay.
Yes, correct. So, but when we look at it, we know Q is Espaillat, Antonio Espaillat. We know I is Richie Torres, and we know R is AOC. But that little part on top of Q that is proposed by the Democrats also includes parts of Riverdale, which right now is under, freshman Congressman Jamal Bowman. So, my question is, and I see Mike laughing over there.
No, man, I'm at these all day, so I'm like,
all laughing. So, all right, listen, the floor is open. What is going on here? We have four congressional seats for the Bronx. Now we're looking at this proposed Democratic lines. They're taking us down to 3 seats for the Bronx, and they're giving AOC Co-op City. They're giving her Riverdale. I think Jamal now is just, up in Westchester. I think they extended the lines for Q, which is Espaillat. What's good? Because even the Republican one is not that different to this.
Wait. Okay, hold on. I first mistakenly looked at the Republican one, and my first thought was like, they're screwing everybody. And I didn't realize it was the Republican map. And I was like, wow, like this really, it was crazy. I'm like, nobody's, and then I realized it was a Republican map. This map looks a lot more like the current districts. But what sort of strikes me is, you're right. Like Q is Adriano, I is Richie, R is Alexandria. But, she's going to have to change her tune a bit on Israel with Riverdale there, you have, and it looks almost as if she's in northern Astoria, which is good for her. But then she kind of creeps into sort of like Latino areas and a little bit of white ethnic up there. And she lost, I'm not sure how much Jackson Heights is in there. I know there's not much Long Island City. It looks like they hooked up Maloney because they took out the Lower East Side where Patel did good, and they put in, more of Sunnyside, Woodside where she does well, and some of the gentrified areas which she'll probably do fairly well in, and they hooked up Nydia by putting her more over in the Lower East Side Alphabet City. The person who really loses out is Jamal. I mean, he's stuck up in Westchester in the suburbs. He's got no Bronx in there. And Alexandria a little bit. I mean, she lost a little bit of that Queens area where, that sort of like, the gentrified vote. They put her up a little far north there, and they gave a lot of that to Maloney. So it looks like the squad is losing out more than anybody else,
Yeah, Mike, I think this is a straight shot across AOC's bow right here.
Right.
Not only is she going to have to explain what's going on in her
views, Rikers.
With her views with Israel, with Riverdale, she's also going to have to explain her far left views with conservative voters of Co-op City. You're talking more along Gun Hill, right? So you're
Whitestone in there, right?
Entirely different voters than they are in Jackson Heights and Astoria. You know what I mean? So it's definitely much more of a conservative, democratic stomping ground versus the Astoria Jackson Heights kind of scenario that was really kind of her base. So I do agree. This is definitely making her walk the walk, talk the talk, and explain what she's actually doing to a base that's not going to let her sleep, because those that are in the Co-op City, this northern eastern part of the Bronx are not going to let her sleep on it. And, and those that are in the northern northern west part of the Bronx also, because they're all very much astute and awake and paying attention, and they're as involved. And so I definitely see that she's gonna have to earn their respect, earn their vote. Leonardo, you're mute. Leonardo.
And so the truth is that that's the two biggest voting blocks pretty much in the borough as well too, right? So you point out the Riverdale area and Co-op City, you can't win those two, you're in trouble.
Yeah.
Because the math just doesn't add up. Even if you get everything, like Mona pointed out, that bottom part that's closer to D, just the math doesn't work out. There just isn't enough votes to counterbalance Riverdale and Co-op City at that point. And so there's a lot of work to be done to win that seat coming up.
Yeah, I mean, that whole swath along the East River there that Maloney now has is like, that was essential for her. And it's almost as if, the funny thing is there's some disenchantment with her on the left already. Now they're really going to be upset when she has to sort of really sort of curtail her message to, more conservative voters in Co-op City and Riverdale.
Right.
And it looks like she has some Throgs in there too, right? I mean,
she definitely. She did not do well in the Throgs Neck area. She did not do well at all in the Bronx, quite honestly. I mean, it was Queens that really carried her over, right? I mean, the Bronx came out and protested. I mean, I've never seen Bronxites show up on the Whitestone Bridge and protesting a politician in my entire life. So the Bronx stood up and said, hey, you know what I mean? I'm sorry, you're not representing our views. I don't know who you're talking to, but you're not talking to Bronxites, you know? And so I definitely say they've given her between Morris Park to the Gun Hill to Co-op, Wakefield.
Little.
Yeah. No, she's got, you know, this is the more immigrant conservative base.
Right.
And even still, I mean, unfortunately, they even saw in this particular district, they had seen a record number of Republicans come out and vote in that district that they had never experienced before. And I worked that last campaign, and I knew a lot of Latinos that were in Jackson Heights that were Colombian that were afraid of socialism. They were so upset with the whole, you know, scenario. So it's going to be very interesting going forward, because if you really look at her donors, her donor base was not the base. I mean, she barely raised like $100,000 from her actual constituents versus 17 point something million dollars that came from outside of the district. You know, and so she's going to have to earn her constituency.
Yeah, and she hasn't garnered any favors from the folks that are going to be the elected officials either.
Nope.
We're talking about, you know, the mayor and all these folks that are going to be in there. You know, she's not going to have many people in her corner either. And so, like you said, it's going to be a tough battle. And, you know, that district is not going to be won on donations.
Right.
I mean, it even looks like she has some of the, like this, like those little like Albanian Jonai pocket there, and some of that Irish over here. All right.
Is this opening it up to a possible, like a real challenge? Could she actually seriously have a race? Because again, Riverdale is not okay with BDS. Co-op, moderate Democrats. Who would challenge her? Could she be challenged? And I mean, I know this is just proposed, but you know, clearly, you know, county is going to have some kind of say, some kind of influence. The legislature, our speaker, Carl Hasty, and actually, yeah, because, yeah, I mean, she's now going into Carl's district. That's Carl and Jamal. I mean, have they kissed and made up?
There was a lot of talk today about Jamal. You know, he would have to give up his seat if he wasn't successful, but he certainly would have a lot of support in that district. And Mark as well. Hey, you know, I mean, they're you know, that sort of, you know, he got a lot of crossover votes in Tracy Towers when he was in office. You know, he's an effective politician. He'd certainly do well with the Italians, and you know, the black vote and the Jewish vote. So he's another person who knows. You know.
Yeah, I think any candidate that really has already done a lot of that groundwork in the Bronx, and that's familiar, that's, you know, that's been out there campaigning for other folks, for him or herself, is already coming in with an advantage over AOC, because she just hasn't been really out there in the streets like that, you know. And so you know, that's going to be an advantage for anybody, even for anybody that just has their kind of pulse on those areas in the Bronx.
Right. And she's not treated the Bronx very well. I mean, she doesn't even have a constituent services office, a full-blown constituent services office. She doesn't have a full-blown office at all in the Bronx. And it's heartbreaking for somebody who was like, I'm from the Bronx, you know, I love the Bronx. And she turned her back on the Bronx, which is why a lot of Bronxites were upset. She did not do well. I find it very interesting that, you know, she ran as an unknown. She won on $500,000. This time around, she had full name recognition. This time around, she spent almost $20 million right? We used to call that buying the vote, but apparently it's a different terminology these days. But she spent, $18 million to her $500,000 the first time around, and she lost votes. She didn't gain more votes.
Right.
She actually lost votes. And so, what is going on? And then knowing that the money came out of the district. So she was able to woo people with all this money from outside influence, right? And so Bronxites saw through it. Unfortunately, Queens, Queens like celebrities. I don't know, Donald Trump from Queens, what are we supposed to say,
Here's something very important as well. I mean, there's a lot of disenchantment among like sort of the left, right? Like there's this feeling that, so it's almost coming from both sides. The rhetoric hurts not only the party nationally, but tends to hurt her with those with sort of more moderate voters. But on the left, they say, well, they don't seem to get anything done that they talk about. They vote with Nancy Pelosi whenever she asks them to. So she's going to be getting it from sort of two different directions. And even, 2 nights ago, going to a $30,000 event and talking about women of color while people were protesting the police outside and getting beat up, it's just not a good look. And it adds to this image of sort of saying one thing and doing another. And that doesn't help you with either side. Maybe another progressive comes out and runs as well, so she's got nowhere to go. So it could be tough.
Mike, did the appearance at the Met Gala have a negative impact?
That's what I was talking about.
Yeah, that's what did that. You think that had an impact?
I mean, it's performative radicalism, right? It's not real. It's like, oh, I'm going to wear this dress, and people are actually protesting, right? People, they did the rent moratorium protests, and they called it a day and went home, and everybody left Congress, and then the Supreme Court overturned it, and there were actually people protesting. Nobody bothered to go back and support them. It's all performative, right? And you're not going to convince that to Republicans. They're going to think she's the devil. But the point is, the squad is with the establishment. So like they're not making anybody really happy because what they say pisses people off, and what they don't do pisses the other side off.
Right.
Yeah. No, it's gonna be interesting. Look, I'm a Co-op City voter. I'm a Democrat. There's no way in hell I'm voting for AOC if these lines pass, and I know I'm not the only one. So Co-op City, that's like, the largest voting block in the Bronx. And like Leonardo said, listen, between Co-op City and Riverdale, she's going to have issues. So, hey, whoever is thinking of running, I can tell you one thing. She's not getting my vote.
But also, Mona, there are issues that people on the left and right agree on, right? It's like a minimum wage of $15, so a living wage. Medicare for all, right? I mean, college debt relief, right? Like, when the Tea Party got into power, they ran the Republican Party with 6 or 7 people. The squad doesn't do that. They're not demanding these things. They're not happening. They blame Joe Manchin. They could hold up the works, and they don't really do that stuff. And so I think there's a lot of people I'm going to say it again, not just the moderate voters, but people on the left who are going to say like, well, what's going on? Like, you're going to nice events and you're sort of living it up, but like, we still don't have a minimum wage. And this is not like crazy stuff. Most people think, yeah, minimum wage is a good thing. Healthcare is a good thing. The fact not paying for my college for the rest of my life to the point where there was no point in going is a good thing. And it just doesn't get done,
And Mona, if I can point out 2 things though, so one, this is again a fumbling of the ball and stuff. This independent committee, they had one job. They had one job. Their job was to put out a apolitical map, just a map, forgetting about, gerrymandering and who it impacts anything. You just put out one map based off the data. They actually did the total opposite. They put out 2 maps. They put out a Republican and a Democratic map. That is totally the opposite of what you were supposed to do. So those are the things that blow my mind, where it's like, you had one assignment and you messed it up. You know, that's like those memes that they put up. You had one job and you got it wrong. Like you got it wrong. The other thing is, and I've been fighting back my frustration on this because I've been going on Twitter trying to get answers and stuff like that. But our borough of the Bronx is the Rodney Dangerfield of districts. We get no respect. No respect. I've been combing over these maps since last night, and it just kills me to see that the Bronx doesn't even have a slide of their own on any of these maps. Like, I couldn't believe, even the one that we're looking at right now, if you pan out, Mona, you can see that the actual labeling of the slide says Queens, and then you see the Bronx maps, you know, districts and stuff like that. The same thing was done in the Senate one, and there isn't even one for the Assembly. Like, there isn't, you can't even find a Bronx Assembly district in any of the maps. I'm like, how does this happen? How does the Bronx just get, you know, left out like this again? I totally don't get it. I haven't had any answers. I was hoping that maybe it was the intern that made the mistake and forgot to add it onto the slide, but it hasn't happened, Mona.
And this is where it's actually really shocking. And I know that we're wrapping up, but I will definitely say this is where it's definitely shocking, considering that we have state leadership from the Bronx, right? I mean, Carl Hastie, who is the Speaker of the Assembly, you know, we have Jamal Bailey, who, you know, who's also, you know, the party, Bronx Party boss, also a state senator. So we're talking, we have the ability, I fail to believe that the Bronx lacks any courage or chutzpah to get things done, right? So is it the lack of constituent investment and interest? Is it, or is it just an intentional dismissal and an erasure by New York City?
Yeah, no, it's pretty shocking that, you know, as Leonardo pointed out, we get no respect. It's like this, there is no slide that just shows the Bronx, that says the Bronx. That slide that we're showing that shows, you know, 3 proposed districts for the Bronx. The title of that slide is Queens. So I don't know what's up with that. You know, one of the most
Republican map has a Bronx section
in New York State is our Speaker, and we're not getting any respect. So it's yeah, that's not good. But we're going to see what happens with this redistricting.
The other thing is, where does, you know, Grace Meng go? I mean, I'm looking at this like.
Good question.
They keep drawing this. They love to do this sort of like Queens to like middle Suffolk like district over and over. I mean, it looks like almost to like Miller Place, Mount Sinai. Like it's like farm country from Queens. You know, I don't know why they insist on doing that, but there's really no Asian cohesive district there either, right? Because you kind of split it 3 ways between R, C, and D, right? And you know, it makes you wonder like what's going to happen with her as well.
Yeah, that's true. That is true. Well, we're gonna, you know, we'll keep watching how this process is gonna unfold, and if Jamal Bowman is gonna end up just being a Westchester congressman, and I
mean, he's gonna have a race, right?
He's definitely gonna have a race. But I think even AOC, if these lines, if they become permanent, she's definitely going to have a race. There's just no way for her not to have a race. And it will be a real contested race. So, you know, continuing on talking about elections and voting, I want to talk about, and, you know, after this, we're just going to have one more topic. So just bear with me. But I want to talk about this non-citizen voting bill that was introduced by Damaris Rodriguez, the city councilman for Uptown Washington Heights. You know, it was introduced early this year, I think in January. Then things got quiet, and now all of a sudden I look at Leonardo's Twitter timeline and I'm seeing flyers talking about a press conference, and you know, the momentum is back to push this non-citizen voting bill. So I just want to pull up some excerpts from this bill. Leonardo, when is you guys' press conference and rally to get support to pass this bill?
Well, you guys can tell from Mona's tone that she is not a fan of the bill. I believe our rally is on Monday at 8:30 in front of City Hall.
Okay, so I want to let's pull up this, you know, this intro. I don't think I can, you know, I can magnify it. I'm not sure. Okay, here we go. So let's start on the top. So this intro 1867, that of course, as I said, is sponsored by Damaris. You see who all are the co-sponsors on this bill. Who, you know, pretty much the usual suspects. So what this bill is, for our audience just to understand, is this bill will allow non-citizens, which include green card holders, people who have, you know, permanent resident status, as well as individuals who have work permits, who are here, say, on a work visa to work. And if you are here, including on a work visa, for over 30 days, you have the right, they want to pass it that you have the right to vote in our local, not state, not federal, but our local elections. And it says here, you know, municipal voter, the term municipal voter means a person who is not a US citizen on the date of the election on which he or she is voting, who is either a lawful permanent resident or authorized to work in the United States, who has been a resident of New York City as defined herein for 30 consecutive days or longer by the date of such election. So to put it plainly, someone comes over here from whatever country, they are here on a work visa, a work permit, they're here for 30 days, they can decide, you know, who's going to be our next city council person for whatever district, who our next mayor is, who our next public advocate, comptroller, borough president. So as Leonardo says, I do not support this bill. And full disclosure, I am an immigrant. I've been here for over 40 years. I went through the process. My family went through the process. Many of us have gone through the process. My belief is if you want to vote, go through the process, become a citizen. Because to my knowledge, and I may be wrong, to my knowledge, there is no country, zero country, no city, zero city, from pick a country on any continent that will allow someone with a work visa coming to work for at least 30 days the right to vote and decide who is going to represent their interests. But I'll leave the floor to our panelists so you guys can, you know, share your thoughts on this outrageous, ludicrous bill. We'll start with Leonardo.
On the spot, as the show is called. So, you know, Mona, like any bill, there's probably going to be room for negotiations and changes and adjustments and stuff like that. I think it's a little unfair that probably the lowest percentage of people that it would grant people to vote is the one that's kind of being highlighted as what's going to be the most impactful. So the true impact is that people that have been here with green cards for many years, like many members of my family, like my own mother before she, became a citizen. We're paying a lot of taxes. We're paying, and a lot of their tax dollars are going into the city budget. Millions and millions and millions of dollars are going into the city budget, right? And so, the one of the pillars of our government is, that you got representation. There's no taxation without representation and stuff, right? So all the people that have been living here, and unable to get there. And you're right, Mona. Like my mother did it. She went through the process and stuff, and she became, a citizen. But the truth of the matter is that let's highlight some things, right? So the process itself takes a minimum between 6 to 8 years to get that done. Between 6 to 8 years, as far as the process with the paperwork, which is even extending even more because of the red tape and everything that's going on, and some of these governmental offices and stuff like that. You have to have at least your green card for a minimum of 5 years before that process even starts, right?
But
so then
you can start applying after 3 years. You can start applying after 3 years.
Okay, let's say 3 years then. All right, so you have to wait 3 years before you do that and stuff as well too. No, the other matter is that it costs thousands of dollars in fees that you have to pay in order to get some of these, this paperwork kind of through the levels and the phases that it needs to go through. There's many.
No, it doesn't. It costs less than $1,000 to file your citizenship application, and there are countless programs and services available, like CUNY and everywhere else. Every week, some city council person is having free citizenship classes and support, legal services.
But Mona, I do want to, at least to implement, also realize that it also depends on the country that they're coming from, right? There are different requirements in order to become a citizen. It's not just a blanket, process. And so that's what people don't realize. So you could come from one country and it could take you, 3 years, and you can come from another country the 6 years or longer. And again, you're going to go through a whole process. So it is different. It does go based on the country in which you are going to be coming from. But I'm sorry, Leonardo, but I'm a kind of side with Mona on the situation, at least particularly with the 30-day residential, situation. I understand that people pay high taxes. We all pay taxes. If you want to live here in the United States, why should you skirt what the rest of us have to do, right? We don't get it.
They're not asking to skirt it.
Hold up a second. But people want to come to the United States to enjoy the benefits of, right? Therefore, unfortunately, we can definitely say there are born American citizens that don't deserve to be an American citizen and enjoy those benefits, right? But then there are still other people that still have to prove that this is really what you want to do. This is what you're going to have to deal with. Can you deal with the strong pressures? Because there are a lot of people that come to the United States and did not realize that they would have to work that hard. They were thought that, easy peasy, and they were going to find gold flecks on the street, and there was, money all over the place. And then they come here and realize that it's difficult. It's challenging to be here, especially if you don't speak the language, or if you don't have family, you don't have friends, you don't have connections, you don't have networks. But ultimately for me, now maybe because I'm a product of the 70s and 80s, I have our enemies send in their nationals to live here for 30 days and then decide how to vote in our elections that's going to best fit whatever agenda they have. And so to me, it's kind of like, you have to have a vested interest in this country. I do agree that if you're here as an immigrant, you want your money, you also want to be represented. But parts of that go into, you have the ability to donate. You have the ability to volunteer and take part of that process. You have the ability to advocate. You have the ability to write letters. You have the ability to do all those things. You just don't necessarily have the ability to go to the ballot box and draw your line. But you have all rights to be supportive of any candidate you want, to give them money if you want, but you could certainly volunteer your time if you want, if that person supports your values. But I think that 30-day now I would even say 365 days is still not enough for you to really say you understand the nuances of your district. You understand historical context of, what's happened in the past, and, or even knowing, who your community leaders are versus somebody who just moved in 30 days before you did, who decided that, yeah, now I want to run for office, and I'm going to tell you how we did it from the state I just came from, and I just moved in from out of state, and now I'm living here in New York, and I want to tell you New Yorkers that you're going to do it my way. I mean, so I still think that I would want whoever came in to actually better understand their community, know their neighbors, know what the community is actually lacking, and it just not be, 30 days or even 365 days, because I don't think that really gives you enough of an opportunity to really make that judgment.
Damaris, let me ask you a question. When you said there were different requirements, who has the shorter period, who has the longer period?
To be honest with you, I don't know shorter period. I do know, I mean, I have I have family and friends from South America. I know that the process that it went for them, Mexicans, it's even harder for them. They can't even come here on vacation without proving that they could afford to actually come here on vacation. And then they have to prove that they're going to actually go back to Mexico. So there are a whole lot of different requirements based on different countries. And so if you're from the Americas, it's going to be a little bit harder for you to migrate to the United States than it is somebody, or to come on vacation.
If you're German, is it easier than if you're Mexican, right? I don't know.
If you're from Sweden, it's going to be a lot easier than if you're Mexican.
I mean, first of all, my instinct is I'm against this. But I don't want to mess with Leonardo's efforts, though. I feel bad. But I do believe we should speed up the process for people. I think that the immigrant community is very important to this country. It always has been, because what makes it. I mean, you watch the Olympics and almost every team looks the same, and then you see the United States and it's oh wow, look at that! Right. Everybody, we win. We have that influx of ideas, personalities, talents, perspectives, which is why I'm for actual inclusiveness and not divisiveness. But citizenship, I think, has to mean something. It's an institution, right? If you can do everything that you can do when you're not a citizen, I'm not really sure what the point of going through the work is. And I think it's. And I am for fairly open borders, but I don't think people who think we should have a border are crazy, because there are things that make the country the country. But I'm against it. I'm not passionately against it. But I see both sides of the issue.
So I just want to clarify something, being that out of the three of you here, I actually went through the process. Right. And this is the thing. When you coming here, to visit on a tourist visa, if you are not from one of the countries that you get an automatic visa, you don't have to apply. Yes, you have to show that when you come here that you have money to be here, to be on vacation, to pay for your hotel, to pay for your food. That's nothing unusual. If you want to go, if you're from some other country and you want to go to the Benelux countries, France, Holland, Belgium, Luxembourg, Germany, guess what? You have to provide proof that you have money to support yourself while you come here on vacation. There's nothing new about that. There's a difference between that and when you are here in this country and you have a green card, and after 3 years of having a green card, you can apply for citizenship. It doesn't matter what original country you're from. Once you have a green card, anyone from whatever country can start to apply for citizenship. And the citizenship process does not take that long. You will get your citizenship if you don't have a whole bunch of issues. For example, Slick Rick had some convictions that he had to fight through before he was able to become a citizen. But if you don't have, issues, or if you don't have orders of protection and all of that stuff against you that you have to get sorted out, then guess what? The process doesn't take longer than 2 years. It usually, on average, it takes like a year. Okay.
So I'm sorry, Mona. So being a Latin American woman, that the United States really prevents Latin American women from coming into the United States. Even
we're talking about when they here and they have a green card. What's preventing people who have a green card from visiting? From filing for citizenship. It's two different things. It's hard for South Africans to come here and visit. Believe me, the hoops that they have to jump through to provide the proof, their bank accounts, letters from your employer, a letter of invitation. We're not talking about people coming to visit. We're talking about people who are already here.
Yeah, the issues is that there's a lot of times
for citizenship after 3 years.
But let's be honest, like the people who are the most upset about this, they're not upset about Melania getting in easily, or the people from Sweden, right? They're upset about certain people. So there is a double standard in sort of like who we apply what to. I'm sure they wouldn't mind if those Swedish people had the right to vote, right? So and again, I'm against it for the reasons I stated, but there certainly is a double standard in who we mean when we talk about people who can't vote. You know what I'm saying?
Right.
Yeah, but to answer Mona's question, like there are barriers, right? So there are language barriers for many folks that it makes it very difficult to go through the process that you went through. There's financial barriers that many people are not able to do the process that you went through, and there's just general life challenges that they're not able to do that. There's several meetings that you have to attend. You miss that meeting, it set back the whole process back. All kind of times. We're talking about people that are in very challenging situations. They just can't up and go to all these meetings sometimes. Sometimes you got to hire a lawyer too, because that you don't have the level of education that you need. Like there's plenty of barriers that these people are facing. And honestly, and I know you highlighted that part, Mona, and Damaris, doubled down on it, but I still haven't heard an argument of telling me why a person that's been here for 2-3 decades with a green card, paying taxes, doing what they have to do, why do they not have the right to be given the opportunity to vote for local elections?
Not to become a citizen.
Because they chose not to become
a citizen.
That's it. They chose not to become a citizen. I can't go to their country and do the same because I am not a citizen in their country. If you have a green card, there are resources. There are so many resources. And if you cannot afford to file and pay the fee for your citizenship papers, you can request a waiver of the fee. There are services, there are programs. If you're saying there are language barriers and there's this and that, and they don't know and they don't understand, but you want them to be able to vote, no.
Yeah.
There is no excuse. If you have a green card, you've been in this, because I've helped people apply on my own. I helped. So if you have a green card and you've been here for 3 years, you can apply for citizenship. You can find a way to do it. There's so much help. There's so much support, services from the city of New York that will help you. The same way New York City is best for benefits, for everything, they also best when it comes to making sure people can file and become citizens. So 3 years, file for citizenship. I'm sorry, Leonardo, we're going to agree to disagree. Nobody here on a work visa or work permit should be allowed to vote in our local elections. And if you're not a citizen, go become a citizen if you have a green card, because you to get that green card, you have to go through the process to get the green card. So you are familiar with the process, or you've been through the process. So now you just take it a step further. You want the benefits of being here, get your citizenship so that you can vote. That's it. you know.
But also people are reaping benefits of them being here as well too, because if we withdrew the amount of money in taxes that these individuals, you know, are giving into our local governments, there would be a deficit there and stuff. So you know, the government and the folks are reaping the benefits that are, you know, that those people are bringing in, and that money's not cycling back to even the communities that they are part of.
It's apples to oranges because they're in this country. Why? Because it's the country of what? Milk and honey, and because they want to have a better life, they want to support their families, they want their children to be educated, blah, blah, blah. That's why they're here. They came here because of all of that. So when they're here and they're working and they pay their taxes, you know, they're contributing. Then when you get your green card, there is no reason for anyone with a green card not to get their citizenship.
Right, and that's
want to vote.
Right, and you also have to realize, Leonardo, also, I mean, I agree they're paying taxes here, they're buying things and such, but also their monies aren't necessarily staying in the country if they're sending it back home, right? And so that money's not being spent here. That money is now being sent into their countries, being spent over there. So while they are paying taxes here, again, like, you know, what Mona and I are saying, if you want the benefits of being in the United States and you want representation, then you need to become an American citizen. You can't turn around and it's kind of like you know, eating your cake, but it didn't work for it. I don't know that, you know, there has to be, you have to want to be an American citizen. You want to enjoy the benefits of living in this country, then you have to join us with also suffering when it hurts to be an American citizen. You know what I mean? So it's, I don't know.
Yeah, and then my other issue with this this bill, my last and final issue is, you know, the you know, your affidavit statement. This is all that's required. Okay, all that's required is, doesn't matter who you are. They don't verify anything because they can't verify anything. And all you have to do is, you know, the affidavit, I swear or affirm that I have been a resident of New York City for a minimum of 30 consecutive days by the time of the next election, am either a lawful permanent resident or authorized to work in the United States. That's it. That's it. No confirmation, no verification, no nothing. All you have to do is just swear that that is the case and just sign it, and then you can vote. I have a problem with that. That should not be the case. It shouldn't be just sign it and say you swear that, you know, you've been here for 30 days and you have a work visa or you're a permanent resident, and that's it. We're going to have problems. So, you know, speaking as an immigrant that went through the process, as someone that helps anybody that comes to me for help, and we're here, and again, I'll say it, if you want to apply for citizenship and you need help applying, contact me. I'll help you apply. Not a problem. But this here, like, this is a lot of, you know, this is going to have a lot of problems. And if they try to push this through before next year's cohort comes in, and before we have a new mayor, just so that they can get it passed without bringing it to, guess who, the voters through a referendum, we're going to have problems. Because the way this is written, I don't care. You cannot go to South Africa and live there for 30 days, or Germany, the UK, Colombia, Chile, pick a country, Korea, Japan, Australia, New Zealand, and then all of a sudden after 30 days, and also not even being a citizen, being allowed to vote. It doesn't work like that. So, you know, for this, no, I'm very sorry. I do not support it, and I am an immigrant and a proud immigrant that went through the process. Everybody needs to go through the process. If you have a green card, 3 years, no excuse. That's, you know.
Well, I mean, it's interesting that you talked about it coming to a political head because, you know, and I mean this sort of objectively, but I'm looking at some of those sponsors, and I'm not going to name names, but I'm wondering if their constituents knew they were for this bill, what they think of
I
it.
don't think they know.
Yeah. And and if say Mayor Adams, I'm not sure if he's in support or not, or somebody wants to make light of that, you could see some people sort of back off, because I can tell you I know some of these districts and they wouldn't be thrilled with it. But I think Leonardo does make a good point in the sense that people here do benefit from work from workers from other countries, so it's not a one-way street.
Yeah, no, and that's why I'm going to go with our last topic for the night, continuing with regards to immigration, and that is the immigration bill that's been introduced in Congress that they're fighting over right now. Right now and talking about people who are here, who are working, who do not have papers, like our farm workers, our essential workers right now, who are the ones, keeping the city running. Congress right now is trying to pass immigration reform, real immigration reform, to give these people, guess what? They don't call it a path to citizenship. A path to a green card. They're calling it a path to citizenship. So if you are undocumented, if you are illegally here, an illegal alien, that's the term, right now Congress is trying to push to get this bill passed to reform immigration, that all of those people who are undocumented can get their papers and be on a path to citizenship. That is the goal, to get them to become citizens. But the decision, as many of you know, is up to the parliamentarian, who is going to decide whether or not they can tie immigration reform and this bill into the budget process. And I don't know about you guys, but I learned a lot in the last few days, because I didn't know about this arcane rule. I didn't know that they can circumvent, that process, and that the final decision on whether or not it can happen, that can change 11 million people's lives, is up to the parliamentarian.
Also, another reason court and judges are so important is because if they do pass reform, what's going to happen? There's going to be a lawsuit. It goes to the Supreme Court. What does the Supreme Court do? They shoot it down. So I'm just adding that in there. It's like, the Democrats can do whatever they want right now, and it can be overturned, and we got to think about judges. That's all.
Okay, wait. But
Yeah.
So how is it that Ronald Reagan was able to get? How is it that we're talking 30 years ago now, roughly. He was a Republican president.
I would say that
he was able to successfully do that.
Yeah, I think that the classic Ronald Reagan, Tip O'Neill thing. I don't think they were really best friends, but I do feel like Ronald Reagan certainly was very conservative, although today he'd probably be a Democrat. And, the Democrats were actually really liberal back then. But there was this idea that no matter who you thought was crazy, they went to work thinking, we have to compromise and get something done. This is an actual job. It's not the say no position. It's not like I'm just going to act crazy. So they worked towards actually getting things done. And people didn't say, oh God, let's sue because the bill wasn't exactly what I wanted. It was a different era in Washington. They go out to dinner together, they drink together, they go to each other's barbecues. It was just a different mentality than it is now. And now, no matter what happens, the lawyers just pile on and they do everything they can to overturn anything anyone does, and there's no cohesive coalition building.
So what do you guys think? Do you think that that the parliamentarian is going to agree with the Democrats and have this be included, or do you think that the Republicans will prevail once again in blocking real immigration reform.
Well, by the way, it's another interesting aspect to see who Wall Street and the corporations are now really backing, right? Like, they like people, they like immigration, right? They like workers. It's, the Republicans have now become almost like a different kind of party. They're not really the party of the rich elite. Like, they're a party of a certain kind of person, in the United States. And they, the question here is, do the Democrats actually want this to happen? Well, of course, because A, they think it's more votes for them, and B, the people backing them want it to happen too. And it's sort of like, do the Republicans at this point have the power to really overturn something like this? Because are the powers that be behind what they want to see happen?
Yeah, I mean, I think the Republicans always have an advantage when it